You're listening to the Bulldog Hour, getting you inside the Wilson football program with weekly game previews, recaps, highlights, and interviews. Now, here are your hosts, Joe Mays and Justin Raffoff.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Bulldog Hour, episode 6 of our 7th season. I'm one of your hosts, Joe Mays, and sitting next to me is my co-host, Justin Raffoff.
Yeah, it's great to be back and kind of in full swing of a season now. You know, I know it's only 1 week down, but, school has started and regular season has started.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah,
Football
absolutely.
action, it was a little bit weird to start, though. We were there Friday night, all of us, and didn't get to see any football.
Got all dressed up with nowhere to go, right?
It was pretty disappointing. Got moved to Saturday, so actually before we got to see a Wilson game, we got to watch a thrilling Big Ten game between Illinois and Nebraska. Boy,
So
was that a game?
The Kyle Krabs tweet, you saw that, right?
Yeah,
that was perfect. Like, talking about how his daughter,
showing
and
his
it's like
daughter,
a 2-0 game at one
He's like,
point.
I wouldn't want a Big Ten game to go any other way.
Right,
So,
how appropriate for a first Big Ten game.
but I do want to console one of our sponsors, Andy Herr, with his Cornhuskers'
Yes.
first loss on the year. Andy, I'm very sorry that you have to go through this every year with Nebraska, but if you're willing to change allegiances, Justin and I are always willing to get you some blue and white paraphernalia.
I am pretty sure that will never happen.
So hold on, I got a text. Oh, he pulled his sponsorship.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. But actually, Justin and I aren't alone. We actually have someone who I think has to be described as a recurring guest now on the Bulldog Hour. Paul Roberts is here for the 4th time this season. We're only 6 episodes deep, and Paul's here for the 4th time. What's happening? It's soon going to be the Joe, Justin, and Paul Bulldog Hour, I think.
JJP.
JJP, that's right.
It's great to be on again. Great weekend. Obviously, Friday did not work out, but for me, it was nice because I got to cover 2 games in one day. It made for a very long game. I was over at Exeter, who the Bulldogs will see in a couple weeks against Central York, in what was a really entertaining game. The skill level talent there was phenomenal. Obviously, Central York's quarterback is headed to Penn State, but a game Exeter could have won, and then got over to Wilson for that 6 o'clock start. So to see Exeter Central York and Wilson Central Dauphin in the same day, pretty good. Today got to play some pickleball, which I was happy about, and former Bulldog tight end Kurt Kelly was on my team today, and we did pickle an opponent, which is when you shut them out. If you beat them 11-0, they call it getting pickled. So quick little shout out to Kurt there. And Josh Danner also over.
Wow. We got all kinds of Bulldog history.
Yeah, those West Reading courts, man. It's a place to be now.
You never know who you're going to run into. Excellent. Well, Paul, thank you for being here. We're going to talk to Paul about the Wilson Central Dolphin game, preview the Mifflin game, which is coming up this Friday, and then at the end, if we have some time, we probably will let Paul talk a little bit about Exeter because they're on the horizon for the Bulldogs as well. But before we do that, we want to get to our announcements here at the start of the show and just thank our sponsors. Presenting the show this evening again is May's Sandwich Shop, and thank my dad for his support over the years. We appreciate everything that they have done for us, as well as our other sponsors. A new one this evening. I want to thank CNS Supply Company for jumping on board.
I saw that. I got super excited.
Very, very happy to have Al supporting us here at the Bulldog Hour, and then Andy Herr and Marty Palm. Andy, we talked about again. Andy, I'm very sorry that you had to watch that Nebraska game yesterday afternoon. And then our 3 anonymous donors. So there are multiple ways you can support us here at the show. The sponsorships and advertising are great, as are the in-kind donations. But definitely check out BulldogHour.com. And when you see our posts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or anything on the website, just do what Justin likes to say,
Yeah, like and share.
Like and share. That's Justin's thing. We let him have that. That's...
I watched you lead up to it, and I'm staring there. I'm like, what do I like to say? Like, I'm like I've never done this before.
Right. It's only the 7th year of the show. It's fine. You'll get it eventually.
I'll catch on eventually.
Our next show will be 1 week from tonight, Sunday, September 5th. Same time and same places you can watch, and we'll recap the game against Mifflin and preview the game against Exeter. So that won't change too much this year. Sunday evenings are going to be the time to watch us. A few other things I want to get to, if I can pull them up properly. Just a couple announcements from the football page before I forget. We are welcoming back 3 teams. The Tradition Club is to Gursky for the next home game, believe it or not, against Martin Luther King on September 17th. And that is the 1985, 1990, and 1996 championship teams. If you are a former coach or player from those teams and you would like to attend, please email wilsonbulldogsfootball@gmail.com to RSVP by September 7th. And then I'm just going to shuffle through some of these photos. Yes, here's the next one. Join the Wilson Football Tradition Club at Friendly's this coming Thursday, September 2nd from 5 to 9. And the restaurant will be giving back 20% of all orders to the Tradition Club, and that will help support the upcoming events like the championship team reunions. And a few more. Nope, we're past all that. Good job, Chad. I want to congratulate the organizers of the Bulldog Barbecue today. Went smashingly, raised a lot of money for the football team. I want to thank the Ramsey and Jones family for putting that together. I heard nothing but praise for everything that they did. Great food and a great fundraiser. So I think that covers it for our normal announcements. We do want to thank Wilson Media Productions for streaming the game yesterday. I have had multiple conversations with people that always wonder if that's actually being done by students. And Justin and I mentioned multiple times that obviously they have an adult advisor, but everything else is run by students.
Yeah, and I think due to some other circumstances, I think students pretty much put on the whole show yesterday, and did a great job. So
yeah, you're not going to get HD multicam setups at too many other high schools around the country that I'm familiar with. I'm sure there's some high rollers outside of in the suburbs of big cities, but
I always like when people are like, "Wait, is that a truck with all the equipment?" And I'm like, "Yes, it is."
Yes, it is. So thank you also to the people that participated in the Tradition Club Chocho sale a few weeks ago. Again, all that money we raise is going to help throw the reunion parties that we do every year. Lastly, just want a little shout out and a show of support to Steve O'Neill. I know he's a big listener. While he's not a Bulldog, he's a Spartan. I know he's going through a personal loss right now. I just want to tell him we're thinking of him and to stay strong. We know you'll be back with your Why Missing Football family real soon. All right, so Paul, let's start with you here and talk a little Wilson Central Dauphin. Bulldogs come away with a victory, 27-21. It was an interesting game. You could tell maybe that it was a week 1 game, or people that caught week 0, I just can't. I can't with the week 0.
Yeah, I'm done with that too.
Yeah, but I mean, lots of penalties. I think it was 15 total penalties, 8-7. CD Wilson, I think, was the split there. We saw many mistakes, people wearing down. What was your biggest takeaway, though, from the Bulldogs-Rams game to kick off things yesterday?
I would say Wilson's defense. I mean, up until the final 3 minutes, Central Dauphin only had 7 points. And, you had one pass over the top on kind of a broken play for CD that gave them a score. But 6 of the first 8 drives that Central Dauphin had, they punted. And that's a team with a really good quarterback in Mosey, who's kind of, you always hear a crafty lefty in baseball, but he's kind of a crafty lefty in football. The issue CD has is their skill position players just aren't where they normally are. To use another baseball analogy, when you look at a lineup card, I think managers will say, well, who scares us here? Who would we maybe want to pitch around a little bit? And I would say the same thing in football games. Who scares you among the skill position players for Central Dauphin? This particular year, there wasn't one guy to me that really stood out. So I think Mosey is a good quarterback. They have a big offensive line. I mean, they average over 260 pounds, but they couldn't do anything. They couldn't run the football. That was the other thing that stood out to me. The rushing yards ended up 284 to 170. Wilson's passing game really wasn't there. But when you can run the ball over 6 yards a carry, sometimes what's the KISS theory? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the best. And I know the Wilson fans, they love that. I mean, they loved Jaden Jones or Gavin Leonard just lowering the boom on somebody. They have no problem running the ball over and over and over again. So I think Wilson's defense stood out to me. Obviously it wasn't a clean game. They fumbled 3 times. They lost one of them. You mentioned the penalties. It was tough to really get into a flow and a rhythm with all the whistles in that game. But listen, when you're up 20 on Central Dauphin in the fourth quarter, this is not a vintage CD team. I think we all recognize that. And with their schedule, at the end of the year, they could be 6-4. There's outside shot they could be 5-5 when you look at their schedule. But still, it's a team that's very well coached, that has a tradition, and you never know with openers. Cam Jones obviously stood out with the punt return to start the game. I know Wilson puts a lot of time into special teams. They've had success against CD in special teams areas trying to block punts and things like that.
2 years ago, we saw Ethan Capitano block the first punt of the game, take it back for a touchdown, set the tone for Wilson's win against them in 2019, and a little bit of the same here just with the punt return.
Right.
It's probably going to be a point of emphasis for a team when the head coach is a special teams guy. That's one thing that they've always prided themselves on, and before he was head coach, he spent a lot of time with the special teams unit. So it shouldn't be a surprise that special teams, like the cliche goes, it's a third of the game.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have that third of the game clicking too, or you're gonna have some issues. It's funny you mentioned the rushing yards. Justin and I had a conversation pregame of what benchmark rushing yardage does Wilson need to get to guarantee a win. And do you remember what we sat at? I honestly think it was way lower than what we got.
It was. I said Jaden and Gavin need 150 combined, and they need over 200 with Hoffman.
With the quarterback.
So if the three of them, I was like, they need over 200 with the three of them. If they get over 150, I was hoping for closer to the 200 with the two. But I was like, they need to be over 200 with the three of them, and they got there.
Well, if you take away, we don't take it away because it was a huge play. Right. If you take away the flight run, they're still at 234.
Right.
Mostly between Jones, Hoffman, and Leonard, with a few other things thrown in there. But Jaden net over 100, Hoffman over 70. Gavin only got 3 carries, surprisingly, but he made them count. I think 40 yards rushing on those 3 carries. So they got the job done on the ground. And like you said, Wilson's known for that. Wilson fans don't care. You get the win and it happens on the ground. That's great. So the other thing that you mentioned that I definitely want to talk about is the early season reactions to the Central Dauphin team. Now, every preview I read picked Central Dauphin to win. Now, I don't know if that was an overstatement on them, or maybe they didn't know anything about them, or they really were down on us. I have no idea what they were thinking, but
I will add to that, though, the predictions I saw were from people in the Harrisburg area.
Oh, yes.
I don't know that anyone in this, Eric Thomas, we all know, and I've worked with Eric for years trading information because he's covered CD for so long, and I've covered Wilson. And Eric had told me early in the week, he said, listen, Paul, this is not a great CD team. Now, I wasn't expecting 27-7 in the fourth quarter, but usually these are grinded out, low-scoring defensive battles. But I do think, and people look for motivation wherever they can get it, but the 4 predictions I saw were all from people who are out of this area. Mm-hmm. And one of the predictions mentioned how CD was, so good up front when they saw them years ago. What happened years ago doesn't really matter in 2021.
When I looked at some of those, I felt like this was like we know Central Dauphin at least a little bit because we've covered them. We saw them last year, and with the way the schedule shook out last year because of COVID and everything, we didn't see any of Wilson, and so we really have no idea. They look at it. If you just look on paper, you have a 3-year returning starter at quarterback,
right?
And you don't have you have a new quarterback. You lost a bunch on the line. Like I think if you look on paper, I could see.
Yeah, there was a case to be made, right?
But like,
although one of the predictions was a 2-touchdown win, which I thought was a bit much,
right?
Just because again. CD replaced a lot too.
Oh yeah.
And like we talked about the skill position players. Plus, coming to Wilson, it's not, and Coach McNamee usually plays games pretty close to the. I mean, he was running the ball with 10 minutes left, down 2 scores, which is something that Coach Doms addressed in my post game interview. So they like to kind of play those 14-10, 17-14 games.
Yeah, which. Historically, that's what the Wilson Central Dolphin games are.
Yeah,
it's not very rarely high scoring. I honestly, I
and this one was until midway through the fourth quarter.
Yeah, you're right. It was 13-7 right at the start of the fourth quarter. So, honestly, the Wilson Central Dolphin District Championship game my senior year, when both teams were scoring in the 30s, is probably uncharacteristic of the way the rest of the games went in the series.
We also had Chad Henne in that.
Well, that's true. That helps. Yeah,
a little bit.
Brent Wise and Arden Bransford too. So yeah, there were some big guns out on that field. But yeah, I guess my biggest surprise I think was how often they ran their quarterback Max Mosey. I didn't think that was something they normally did with him. I guess with their type of offense, it would come up. They certainly didn't use him in that capacity 2 years ago, the last time we got to see them. But that was my biggest surprise.
I think some of that came out of necessity as the game flow kind of took place, because pretty much all of their big plays or successful, like big gains, came from him either running for his life and then dumping it off. I say dumping. The one was a long pass, but the other one just kind of dump it over everybody that was chasing. Or he was able to run for a little bit because they really couldn't get other guys running with consistency. There'd be a run here and there, but the defense really stood tall. So I was glad to see that, but I was a little surprised that he was really all they had, even though we knew that they didn't have a lot returning at the skill positions. I mean, and I'm sure it'll come along for him as the season goes and as guys get used. But you can see some of the frustration, like later in the game when they just couldn't get things going, and then had some failed fourth downs and had some where it looked like they might go for it, but they kind of punt and things like that. So
yeah, the 4th and short with 10 minutes left stunned me that they punted the football there, because it was, if it's 4th and 8, 4th and 9 or 10, I understand. That was a 4th and 2,
right,
and you're down 2 touchdowns on the road in the fourth quarter. How many more chances are you going to have? And then TJ Flight kind of broke their back with that 50-yard run on the jet sweep. But to your point, they're starting running backs, whether it be Zion Allen or David Chase, they had 3 carries combined.
They went with the fullback.
In this,
right.
And they went with English instead, who's much more of a bruiser. He's about 215. But that goes back to my point. They just don't have. There's no Jaden Jones to steal a Rick Pitino line when he said Larry Bird ain't walking into this locker room. There's no Jaden Jones walking into that locker room.
Which is kind of what surprised me on one of the other fourth down calls when they handed it to a guy who typically doesn't run the ball. But even the fact that they kind of handed it off at all kind of surprised me. Like, at that point, there had been enough of the game that took place that we kind of saw, like, they were successful when Mosey had the ball in his hands. I was surprised they didn't try something with him. Maybe that's what they're thinking. Look, I'm not advocating for me to be a play caller. That is certainly not it. And it's easy for me to second guess after we stuffed the big guy. But I was just surprised to see them take the ball out of their most successful players' hands.
Yeah,
on that
I wasn't in that spot just because Coach McNamee, they like to play physical football. I mean, that's kind of their MO. Now, the ball carrier in that situation, I mean, that was kind of odd, but
because he never got turned upfield, and for 4th and less than 2, to not get to have a guy that big with his shoulders facing our sideline, I'll take that. I'll take that.
Yeah.
But
other than what was that I guess it was the throw to set up the touchdown to cut it to one score. Mosey really didn't do much through the air at all.
No.
Like he was.
No.
There are a few short things here and there. He did much more with his feet than he did anything
and when
else.
he did with the air, he had to run, like, because they were broken plays because he had to run out of the pocket.
So he finished with 130, and 63 came on one pass.
Right.
That was essentially half his passing yards were on the one play, which was a broken play, and credit to them, they got behind the defense.
Absolutely.
But yet, you're right. I mean, outside of that play, they threw for about 70 yards in the game. So that goes back to what I was saying about Wilson's defense. Wilson's linebackers really good, and I know Coach Walber had told me during the week about the depth there. So even if Jones isn't on the field and he had cramping issues, but let's say you just want to rest him because he's going to run the ball a lot, the guys they were rotated in at linebacker did a really good job.
They have a true two deep across the three. At least for this game plan, they didn't do the standard 4-4. They were in their 4-3, and the starters are generally Gavin Leonard, Landon Farrell, and Jaden Jones. But Gavin and Jaden both getting the bulk of the carries going to need to be spelled. So Sean Dendel and TJ Flight, who played a lot last year at linebacker, are there to spell him. And then sophomore Ryan McMillan was spelling Landon Farrell. All of them at some point were nicked up or cramping. You didn't really see much of a drop-off from the linebacker spot when they were rotating through. It's a true two deep that they're confident that any of those six guys will get the job done.
Did you guys know coming up through the system that Farrell was going to be a player? Because to me, he was new. He was not on my radar. And in the first half, I thought he was one of their best defensive players.
So thankfully, Justin and I got to coach Landon at West. He was one of ours, and he was a two-way starter at center and middle linebacker for us. And he was one of the better players from that class, that junior class that's up there at the high school right now. I knew that he was battling for that middle linebacker spot, and he's one of the guys that was mentioned often during the senior interviews as someone who could have a big breakout season. So I'm not surprised that he already showed out in one game. How many tackles did he end up with? He was all over the place. I heard his name a bunch.
Yeah, the first half, I know he had at least 3. It was pretty. Leonard ended up with the most. He had 9.
Okay.
And then there were a bunch of guys with 6. Another guy who stood out to me was Eric Jackson.
Yeah.
And I think I mentioned this on Twitter. As far as a corner combination, to have Cam Jones on one side and Eric on the other, that's pretty good.
And I think the biggest thing, besides them mostly shutting down when they're in there, the Max Mosey passing, is those guys' willingness to come up and run support. And I saw a few times Eric Jackson flying up when he needed to and was supposed to make the play. Wasn't missing tackles. It was short tackling or getting them out of bounds. And it was a huge part of the game yesterday. So, yeah, Cam and Eric, that's a pretty good pair. I know Jamie Sands, I'm sure, would jump in and say, well,
I'm sure he'll have some things to add in. Yeah.
It's like, we need to get better here.
I'll hear him tomorrow morning is what I'll hear. But yeah, and to kind of rewind it back, Eric was kind of, at least, again, from a semi-outsider perspective, last year when Mason got dinged up early in the year, Eric then was kind of in that role. And so he got some valuable time last year, him and Cam, obviously both, and to return both those guys, like you said, that could be huge. And while sometimes with the cornerbacks, you don't necessarily notice it, because like sometimes I know early on they threw deep and Cam was right. I mean, he was perfectly positioned and just batted the ball down. And like sometimes you don't notice it because they won't throw it, or it goes in the stats as an incomplete pass or pass breakup if it's there. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not necessarily the big headline play because it's usually a play that didn't happen.
Right. You usually notice corners when they get beat.
Right. Right. And so
it's like an offensive lineman. You don't notice them until it's a holding call.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So yeah, for those two to play well, we're going to need that throughout the year.
Yes. Back to the tackle. Leonard had 9. Capitano, Drake, Jackson, each had 6, and so did Ramsey. Flight had 5, Farrell had 4. It seemed like more than
Man,
that.
yeah, I feel
But
like I heard his name a lot
yeah,
more than that.
it was pretty balanced though. But he was just one to me that I, going into the season. But again, there are a lot of new faces on this team. I mean, you look at that offensive line. That was another huge story. I mean, to have 4 new starters on the offensive line.
Well, and 2 injury replacements possibly as well,
right.
depending how you look at it.
Including Dendel, who's a 260-pound sophomore, who's their biggest kid. And so to have inexperience and injuries, Worley being out too, and to run for over 6 yards a carry, those guys, they deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, they earned it. They had a great game. So before we talk about maybe some of the lesser known entities coming into the year, or maybe even guys during the game that at parts you weren't sure who they were until the second half with the cramping issues that crept up. We have someone that's new to the show and wants us to talk about some of the younger guys, as in not up at the high school yet. Troy, I appreciate that. Justin and I both coach at West, so we get to see these guys early. But because we coach at West, we don't get to see anything related to Southern. And I don't want to come on here and only talk about West and completely ignore Southern. So if there's someone that can give us a report on what's happening at Southern, be more than willing to spend a few minutes each show talking about what's in the pipeline at West and Southern. But I am in no way opening that bag where we only sit here and talk about the team at Wilson West. So if there's someone that wants to give me the down low on what's happening at Southern, Justin and I just don't have the opportunity to see them play because we're busy with the guys at West. But we appreciate the heads up and would love to talk about what's coming. But we want to make sure that we keep it fair there. We don't want to favor one team.
Any up-and-comers at Whitfield Elementary?
You never know. You never know. You hear these names early and often. But if you are listening out there live, we would love, if you have a question for Paul, you want to ask him something about Central Dauphin or Mifflin or whatever, just leave it in the chat. Hopefully we will see that.
Exeter too.
Exeter.
Got to see them in person.
So we can throw whatever you got at Paul. But let's talk a little bit about the second half of the Central Dauphin-Wilson game. Just because Wilson was going through a cramping epidemic out there on the field. At one point, Wilson was down to the backup quarterback with the third running back. Then at one point, the third quarterback handed off to a wide receiver who just, went 50 yards for a touchdown. So it worked out.
I said to Joey right before that, all right, Crocona, here we go.
Yeah.
I'm like,
time to shine.
I was like, we need good snap and clean handoff. Well, I actually made it plural, and we only needed one, so it worked out well. So
so all the credit of that play goes to Justin Raffoff.
No, that is not what I said.
No, but to play 3 quarterbacks, at least 3 running backs, and still be in the position to win. Now, they were holding on there at the end, but what do you make of the depth of this team? You talked about it at the linebacker, but I think it's across the board.
Yeah, I was impressed with what a lot of the players told me after the game, that they gave both Brubaker and Crocona credit, which is nice to see because sometimes, upperclassmen, and if you're dealing with backups, they may not be on the same level. But, for those guys to come in and keep running the offense, that's important because you never know when injuries are going to happen, and the next guy has to be ready to go. Coach Doms kind of ripped some of the players because I asked about hydrating before the game, and I'm recalling if dumb was the word he used, but he mentioned some of the players drinking caffeine before the game because they thought, well, that'll get us a lot of energy.
Temporary.
Yeah, and it's not good as far as hydration goes at all.
Yeah, we have interviews coming up. One of them was with Coach Doms, and I asked him that exact question too. So
pickle juice does work. I've heard that at multiple schools. Now I've heard the taste is awful. In fact,
I would rather lay there with cramps all over my body than drink pickle juice.
That
is my nightmare.
One Governor Mifflin player told me on a scale of 1 to 10, as far as the taste, he gives it a -2.
Wow.
For pickle juice, but they say it does work, and on a serious note, you need your starters in the game. I mean,
Yes,
to
you do,
have
yeah.
a handful of guys be out like that, it puts the team in a difficult situation. So I think moving forward, that is going to be addressed, and hopefully also it's not 90 degrees, and the humidity's been crazy. This Friday, looking ahead now, who knows with the weather, but I don't think it's going to be that high.
It is supposed to get better for this week, and then every week thereafter, you should see it drop off. So the weather shouldn't be as much of an issue, at least temperature and humidity wise. You never know about the rain, but we don't have any control over that, unfortunately. Now, we're going to talk to Paul here after we throw up our interviews here about BurkeSportsReport.com, where he has been throwing up an endless stream of video interviews,
and they're great. You got to get over there.
Yeah, and I just the one you did with Gavin Leonard with Goose there.
There's two up now.
Yeah, now we got the encore. So we actually tracked him down after the game last night as well. We got to talk to him and TJ Flight. So I'm going to play that one for you right now.
All right, guys, we're here with TJ Flight and Gavin Leonard after Wilson's 27-21 victory over Central Dauphin. Guys, great to come out with the win tonight. What's your biggest takeaway from the win?
Just how well we played together as a team. I think that makes the most of it. I mean, Gannon, for everything stacked against Gannon, he stepped up big. Nick Cracona coming in, throwing, running, all that. And then Brady Klein, another freshman coming into this game. It's just the way we played together as a team I feel like it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, I liked how we were able to go down a bunch of people, missing a bunch of starters, and people would come up, replace them, show something about our team.
Shows how we're always ready.
All right, so each of you scored a touchdown tonight. TJ, we'll start with yours, right? And that ended up being the game-winning touchdown, like in terms of score.
Yeah.
When they called the play, what did you think? Like, did you think, oh man, this has a chance to go, or was it kind of one of those things where it just opens up as you're running?
Yeah, with our third-string quarterback in Nick.
Give me props.
Yeah. I knew that we had to make a play. I saw blocks open up, big block by Kyle, and I think it was Sean or someone on that side. I saw a hole, I cut back in, I saw open space, I knew I had to make a play.
Awesome. And Gavin, when we're close to the goal line, right? And I think we had like first and goal at like the 1 or 2, and a couple tries. We get the quarter break. You go back in. Were you excited to hear your number called when you're in the huddle? I mean, I'm sure you are, but like, what are you thinking with the play call and with that formation? Was there no stopping you?
They said that dozer formation, and I knew what I had to do, and I just put my nose down and dove, pretty much. I just found that hole and dove.
All right.
That's all I needed to do.
Great job, guys.
So I just want to jump in and let's talk about that dozer formation. How often have you guys been practicing? Is that something you practice every day, or is that every so often?
This week we put it in, actually, Tuesday.
Yeah.
It's usually Jaden in the backfield, me up on the right, and McMillan. But with the injuries, I had to go in there and then took care of business, I guess. Did what we had to do.
You guys started off, Brad Hoffman got to start at quarterback, played really well. I forget how many yards rushing he had, 70-some yards rushing?
I think 70, yeah.
And then Cramp started hitting him, you, Jaden, just all down the roster. So you got to go in that dozer formation, and Gannon Brubaker was in at quarterback. Then Gannon came up and made more huge plays throughout the whole evening. Talk about Gannon and what he means to this team.
Gannon's a really key player to our team. I mean, I have full faith in him. When he's on the field, I know he can get the job done. I mean, he goes in there and he's ready to go, covering that onside kick, running that dozer, and then going out and rolling out and throwing a 2-point conversion. I mean, he's got guts, man. He's a great player for our team.
Yeah, the biggest plays in the second half were made by guys that weren't even in the game in the first half, and it's amazing what kind of a team effort can do and get a team win. So congratulations on opening the season with a hard-fought victory, but I know you guys are already thinking about Game 2 next week in Shillington.
Sir.
Take a look at those films, and hopefully we can talk to you guys again next week.
Thank you so much.
All right, so that was our interview with Gavin Leonard and TJ Flight, both touchdown scorers in Wilson's opening game victory against Central Dauphin. But Paul caught up with many Wilson players and Coach Doms as well, and his interviews are posted on a website known as BurkeSportsReport.com. So, Paul, before we finish up Central Dauphin and preview Mifflin, why don't you talk to us a little bit about this new venture of yours? how did it get started? When did you start thinking about it? And why did you decide to start it now?
Believe it or not, it all came together in less than a month. So I honestly, and people that know me, I'm a very harsh critic of my work, kind of a perfectionist, and I am really thrilled with how it's turned out so far. And I go back to my Syracuse days. I'll never forget. I forget the professor's name, but I remember what he said the first day of class. He said, "You are not the story." And this was a broadcast journalism class. And I've always remembered that. And that's kind of the focus with this website. The stars of the website are the players and the coaches. My mission statement is pretty simple. It's giving student athletes a voice and talking to them, but not just about sports, because sometimes we forget these are not robots. You know, they do other things besides play football or basketball or baseball. So I talk about them. What type of music do you like? Is it the Rolling Stones?
That became a great topic this week. Yeah.
Who's the funniest guy on the team? Who's the biggest eater on the team? Who's the strongest kid on the team? I was joking with Nick Singleton about, do you guys remember the Saturday Night Live skit, How Much You Bench?
Yes.
It was hilarious. So, asking him different questions about what he's lifting. But, what do they like to do when they're not working out or playing football? What are their favorite TV shows or movies? Are they binge watching anything? The video games have been huge because all these kids are playing video games. I think it was Colin Payne, Exeter's quarterback, who called out the entire county in one of my interviews with, was it MLB The Show? I don't know. I go back to RBI Baseball and Baseball Stars.
Well,
I don't know the new games.
I do know you asked Kyle Hassler about, either you asked him about Madden or you asked about video games. And he brought up Madden. I think he said TJ Flight was the guy. That they had Steelers Eagles all the time.
Yes.
You're talking. He was playing with the Steelers, and you're like, how are you not beating the guy using the Eagles all the time? And that just goes to show. And he said, well, TJ's just better at the game than I am. He's just the best one.
Pick the Chiefs or Buccaneers. I mean,
not the Eagles.
Right.
That's
but
not going to get you anywhere.
So. It's good to see the kids laughing, having fun, and with the coaches too. My conversation with Coach Doms, we were talking about him golfing and the holes in one that he's had, and one hole in three, which was an interesting story.
That was a great story.
You talk about fishing, all kinds of different things. JJ Jordan from Berks Catholic, I found out he loves to fish. And then he said one of his favorite spots is in Wyomissing. I said, are you sure they let you over? He's like, I sneak in. Yeah, he's like, I sneak in over. So it's just trying to, talk to these kids about, obviously sports is going to be a big part of it, but things outside of that as well. And, with my radio background and being a talk show host for so long, that's kind of, my forte, if you will, is the interviews. I mean, there are all kinds of different platforms, but that's what I think differentiates BurkeSportsReport.com is these videos. And the previous year, I got time to kind of dabble in different things. And with my Twitter account, you see the analytics. Everybody talks about analytics in sports. Well, there are analytics for social media as well. And you can kind of see what gets a reaction and what doesn't. By far, hands down, not close, the interviews with the kids got the most views and most impressions than any other content that I put out. I mean, it was not close. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but we're in a point-and-click visual era. And the days of reading Don Quixote, which I had to read over the summer. It's about it's a great book, but it's about 1,000 pages. People now, it's instant gratification. They want to see the video, click on it, a couple minutes, and they're moving on. What do we all do when we grab our phones? We do this, right? We scroll. Right. And so that's kind of the niche that I found, and the feedback has been really positive. I mean, it's been great. I have to thank Phil Raculia and certainly Wilson. Sports fans know that name. Phil is Sal's brother. Sal, of course, the baseball coach. at Wilson, who's won a couple district titles. But Phil is the owner of Pizza Como, and right next door now is The Yard, which is the title sponsor for BurkeSportsReport.com. It's really fun. It's virtual golf. Kevin Quimby, who Wilson fans know, he just texted me today. He was in there playing with his kids. I know some of the Wilson baseball players, Mifflin baseball players have been over there playing. If you know Sal, you know he's a nice guy. Phil's the same way. The whole month of August, he let people come in and try it out for free. He didn't charge anyone anything to play golf. And you can pick like St. Andrews. I mean, you want to play it. The holes are
there for you.
Right. Yeah, I mean these famous courses from around the world, and you bring in your own clubs, and it's like you're playing 18. And the nice benefit is you have Pizza Como's food and cold beverages literally feet away. So whatever you want to order, I mean their pizza's great, their sandwiches are great, but it's right there. So you can have that in a second. I mean, so it's neat for golfers. If you want to set up a tee time, the number is 484-336-4244, 484-336-4244. September 1st is the opening day, so that's when people will have to start paying. But if you have a foursome, it's really reasonable, and you're hanging out with your buddies, swinging your golf clubs, and eating and drinking. It's a lot worse in the world.
You don't have to worry about the exercise of walking around the course. You're right there.
Yeah.
No carts.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about
Yeah, and it's in the 5th Street Highway in Muhlenberg. Everybody knows where that is. But the website, and the website just launched last Friday. So we're talking 9 days. I've already had 7 additional sponsors hop on board. And my focus really has been the content. So I haven't even really focused on kind of the sales side of things. And the people that know me, I never got into this field to make a lot of money. I like to promote the kids. A lot of these coaches and athletic directors, they're my friends, which, helps as far as, the interaction, and getting access and getting information that maybe other people won't get. Just the familiarity. When I've been covering sports in this county over 20 years now. So, these people. People always ask me, like, who do you want to win? I'm like, well, I've covered Coach Doms for a long time. And Bill Hawes, who was the offensive coordinator under Jerry Slemmer, his son Ben is one of my best friends from high school. Guys like Steve Brock and Kyle Hare, they text me. I probably have 15 messages already from them about this. But on the same side of that, I've known the Vecchio family for a long time too. Mike and obviously Mick and Coach Lang.
Just be careful. Remember, you're on the Bulldog Hour
that's
and
true.
you play Mifflin this Friday.
That's true.
So.
But my point is, like, I know people in every school district.
Right, you made those connections.
Yeah,
over the years.
and I think that shows in the interviews. The kids are relaxed. I mean, credit to the Exeter players. That was a gut-wrenching loss. And Colin Payne and J.R. Strauss. And Strauss actually came over to watch your game.
He was one of the guys that came over.
Yeah, but, I mean, they were there. They answered the questions. And that shows character. And then I think there's also the intrinsic value of trying to help these kids with their communication skills. And I've made this point on social media a lot. It's overlooked, but nowadays we're on our phones so much. But if you want to get an internship, you want to get a job, you want to talk to a college recruiter, eventually there's going to be
a verbal back and
forth.
forth.
It may be even Zoom, but eventually there's going to be something in person. How do you handle yourself? How do you communicate? The only way you get better at that is doing it. So I've had a lot of parents send me some very nice notes thanking them because with high school kids, you got to work. It's just like anything. It's just like playing football or anything. You got to work at that.
Practice,
your
right.
communication skills, and it's kind of it's there's not really a curriculum for that per se. So I enjoy that side of it too. It's just trying to help the kids get better, because a lot of the kids I do interview, I mean, they'll be playing in college somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
and how do you represent not only yourself but your coaches and your school? I mean, you have someone who is really struggling in that department. That coach is going to go back to his assistants and he's going to say, "Hey, this kid from whatever, I mean, it was, I don't know, it was just tough to get a good read." It's important. Stats tell one thing, but that interaction. When I know a lot of the local college coaches too, and they'll come up to me at West Reading League and they'll ask me about so and so, but they also want to know immediately what type of person is that kid. If they're
off the court.
If they're going to recruit you, they want to know they're going to get somebody who they can count on, things like that. But yeah, the website's been great. Thanks for letting me promote it a little bit. BurkeSportsReport.com. My rankings are going to be on there, like them or
Robert's
not.
rankings,
As I always mention, the sun will come out tomorrow. But all that's, I have a story up there now about AJ Alexi from Twin Valley. I don't know if you guys heard.
Yep.
He is going to be making his major league debut Monday night for the Texas Rangers.
That's awesome.
Kid pitched for Twin Valley, 6'4" righty. So all of that's on the website.
Well, and I'll speak for Justin here. I'll just say that we're both very happy to have as many people that will positively cover Burke student athletes and the scholastic programs. The more the merrier. Coverage is great. Very excited when you announced it. Didn't know it was coming. So when it popped
Neither did
up, I was like, all right, here we go.
When you sent out the tweet, like, I've got big news, like, Joey and I immediately like, oh my gosh.
And then you made us wait. You made us wait.
Yeah.
Justin and I are back and forth.
That's a tease in the journalism business.
Yeah. When is he going to drop this?
It was like hook, line, and sinker. You sent that, and I'm constantly like checking. Did Paul release it? Yeah. What's going on?
Yeah.
So, but the reason I said I speak for Justin saying this, how appreciative that you're doing this, is because you kind of alluded to it. You spoke with the Exeter players after their loss.
Oh, yeah.
Justin and I do not speak to the players and coaches after a loss. It's just we're giving them the space because we're at this weird, like, we're middle school coaches. He's a teacher at the high school. We hang out on the sidelines. We don't want to cross a line anywhere. So but
you guys are in a different
more than
position
happy to let you talk to them after the losses.
And that's, I've always tried to be independent. Now, certain schools get a lot of coverage because they're really good. So, like, I had a friend of mine just asked me yesterday. He said, Wilson hasn't had a losing season since 1963. He's like, Paul, that can't be right. I said, you want to bet $1 million on it? But so, there are programs, whether it's Reading High basketball. Reading High basketball gets a lot of coverage. They've won 2 state titles in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay. You've had Stu Jackson, Danielle, Lonnie. One last thing about my website. All of my all-time basketball teams for all the schools in the county are on my website. That was a huge hit that I did.
That
was
fun. I forget when that was, but
it was my gosh. Yeah, it was a couple summers ago.
People were losing their minds over it. It was great.
Yeah. So Wilson's team is very interesting because there are 4 what I would call locks, and then the 5th spot is kind of up for grabs. But I even went back and a huge thanks to Ed Kuhn because he helped me with a lot of the older players.
Oh my gosh, he knows so much about Berks County basketball.
Like West Reading and Kutztown teams. Talk about Ron Crick. If you ever see Mr. Kuhn and you like hoops. I mean, and he'll talk with you about it, but he played with Ron Crick. But all of those teams are on BurkeSportsReport.com, and I'm going to focus football, basketball, baseball primarily because that's what I've covered for the past 20 years. But if there are other outstanding athletes, I've no problem interviewing those type of people.
You'll go where the stories are.
Right.
That's where you want to talk to as many people as possible. So thanks for giving us the download on BurkeSportsReport.com, and we're always happy to have you here on the program with us, Paul. We do have our own interview with Coach Doms, and after you wrap up with the Bulldog Hour, here, you listeners, make sure you head over to Paul's website and listen to. He's got 4 interviews from the game last night, but let's take a listen to Justin and my interview with Coach Doms right now.
years after. I didn't graduate until like.
All right, we're joined post-game now with Coach Doms after Wilson's 27-21 victory against Central Dauphin. Coach, you didn't get to see the Rams last year. Did anything change in the 2 years since you got to play Central Dauphin the game? They seem to have a slightly different offense than usual, but they still have big bodies, big backs. But what was it like to play them again?
I think their offense is pretty much, different players, and they obviously ran Mosey a lot more. They ran quarterback run a lot to death, some quarterback counters and things like that, which I said, I talked to our defensive staff and said, hey, they're going to do that, even though that's not normally part of their offense. But, the coaches put a good game plan together on both sides of the ball. I thought Jeremy called a very good game offensively, especially with all the injuries. And defensively, our secondary played great until Mosey would scramble, and then we peak and lose contact with receivers. So we got to do some scramble drill, and we'll get better at it.
Not only was it the opening game for the coaches and players on both teams, but also the officials getting back into the swing of things. You seemed pretty heated at times. Was there something specific you were seeing that they weren't calling, or?
Well, 2 years ago they changed the rule on how many people in the backfield, how many people in the line, and it was clearly explained to me last year, and they were totally interpreting it a totally different way, and they showed me a rule in the rule book that doesn't really apply to what they said. And they said, oh, look, it says here you only have to have 5 guys on the line. I said, so that means we can line it with 6 guys in the backfield. And the official went, well, no. So
can't have it both ways.
I'll talk to their interpreter, and I'll talk to this week and get this straightened out. But they insisted, and I said the rule changed 2 years ago, and they specifically said it was to make it easier for the officials because it's hard to count the guys on the line of scrimmage. It's easy to count the guys in the backfield. So they've been wrong, but that's the way it was explained to me last year or so. And they said no. So we'll get it straightened out.
The biggest thing to come out in the second half after going up big, some of your players seemed to be cramping up. Is that a conditioning issue? Is that a pregame food issue? Is that something that you can fix over the next week?
We addressed it like all kids. They think a little caffeine is going to make them play better. And how dumb are you? A little caffeine is going to cramp. So we addressed it, and I think hopefully they learned from it. It put us in a scary situation. When you're down to your third running back, you're down to your third quarterback, and the game's on the line. So hopefully they get smarter, and we learn from that.
By and large, Wilson's been playing on Friday nights for the better part of 3-4 decades now, but back-to-back games on Saturday with last year's game moved to Halloween. This year's moved because of a thunderstorm last night. What were the discussions like with the referees, the athletic department, and Central Dauphin to get this game played today? Is it something that was up in the air? Was it ever going to be able to be played last night?
I would have preferred to play it last night. I guess you have to rate it by about 8:30. Everything had gone through, but everybody had SATs this morning, so they had kids taking SATs. So you don't want to get home too late for things like that. So. The discussion, and obviously with SATs, we couldn't bring them back earlier. They had to have time to get home and everything, so 6 o'clock seemed to be the decision. I didn't like it. I don't like it. I wanted to play, but now you have a short week.
All right. Well, thanks, Coach, for joining us here. Congratulations on the opening game victory, and hopefully we can talk to you next week in Shillington.
It'll be interesting. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, so that was our interview with Coach Doms. Again, you can listen to Paul's interview with Coach Doms, where he brings up a few other things, including the Central Dauphin play calling throughout the game, but most notoriously in the fourth quarter, again, on BurkeSportsReport.com. So, guys, the last part, we'll put a bow on the Central Dauphin game here, is go over our player of the game. And Justin and I like to sometimes not necessarily focus on statistical achievements. It's what was the story of the game. Anyone can go on and look at the stats and be like, that was the biggest player of the game. And there are many of those that came up last night. And at halftime, our player of the game is different from what we ended up with. At the beginning, you're thinking it's got to be Cam, it's got to be Jaden. Who had ridiculous games. Cam's first half with that punt return was amazing. Lockdown guy on defense. Jaden rushed for over 100 yards. Jaden's been player of the game with us before. He'll be player of the game with us at some other point this year as well. But I was thinking back as I was going through today with just what Justin and I asked in the post-game interviews, and then what we talked about all evening last night leaving the game. It was just those other guys stepping up when they were asked to.
It was such a team effort last night, which was great to see.
And the stat line doesn't tell that story because the player that we picked, the stat line isn't going to be there. But the biggest plays of the game, he was the guy directly or indirectly involved. So for week 1, our player of the game is senior quarterback, defensive back Gannon Brubaker, because I mean, just think about that second half, what he was in there to do when Brad came out with his own cramping issues. He was in on the Dozer series, which we just heard was just implemented this week. It was already without Jaden as well. So he came in, got the ball in the Goose's hands. He got in for the touchdown. But the bigger part of that, and unfortunately I didn't get a great picture of him throwing the ball, but what an amazing play-action play. And you heard Coach Doms in our interview say how amazing he thought Coach Palm, Jeremy Palm, the offensive coordinator, his game plan and his play calling all night was phenomenal. This 2-point play, I think, is the feather in his cap because no one, including me, thought that this was going to be a pass. Even when the play started going, I'm following everything, and all of a sudden...
Right, we just barreled it in. We just, barreled it in from the 2. Hey, let's
do it again.
Run the other play.
And your starting quarterback's not in the game.
Right. So all they do is call play-action pass from Gannon to your freshman tight end. Who, his big brother's just playing up at Penn State, no big deal or anything like that. But, so I was able to catch Brady climb with the ball in the end zone in the celebration with John Ramsey, which was great. But unfortunately, I missed the picture of Gannon throwing him the ball. And it was a beautifully executed play, a perfect throw. And then Gannon was in a lot throughout the fourth quarter. And then maybe the biggest play after you're losing momentum and under a minute to go, another onside kick is coming, and who recovers the ball? Gannon Brubaker.
Right.
So unbelievable game from him. We wanted to talk to him post game, but we missed him in the hubbub and the shuffle afterwards. He was a busy guy. I know his dad was there to watch him play. So it was a great evening for Gannon and the team, and what a start to the 2021 season. And so that's it. That's our player of the game for week 1's victory over Central Dauphin is senior Gannon Brubaker.
Yeah, and that's not an easy situation. Friday night, big crowd. The student section was packed there for Wilson. You're playing a perennial power, although we discussed it's not a vintage CD team, but it's every game for Wilson's a big game. There's a lot of pressure on everyone, and to be the in the quarterback position, kind of important. So to handle things like that, and then Cracona obviously coming in a little bit too, credit to the guys off the bench who were ready to roll. And that's been a staple of Wilson's program there are 85 players on the roster. And I think that's why they get such a commitment and a buy-in from all the guys, because they realize if you don't, there's someone right behind you who's going to play. Nobody's guaranteed anything with this type of program.
So Wilson got their 5th ever victory against Central Dauphin, one of the few opponents that Wilson doesn't have a winning record against. Only the 12th matchup of all time, so they've improved to 5-7, but have won 2 in a row against them after dropping 4 in a row.
Yep.
First and only team to ever beat Wilson 4 times in consecutive
That
seasons.
is a good nugget.
I think one of the other teams that had been at 3 was Pottsville. I remember when I've been working on BulldogHour.com, there were a few Pottsville season openers that the Bulldogs dropped. I believe it was in the late 80s or early 90s. And Central Dauphin, when they got that victory in 2018, were the first team to win 4 times in a row. But now Wilson's got 2, so all is right in the world then. So speaking of series, none bigger for Wilson than Mifflin, which is week 2 now for what? How many seasons are we now? Week 2. I mean, I always liked when I liked when it was week 10. That rivalry games always feel best in week 10. But of course, when I was playing, they were still in the Lancaster-Lebanon League. Not possible anymore. But week 2 and last week 2 game, because next year Wilson Mifflin will be week 6. That'll be really weird. But that's just the way the schedule is going to work out with the Berks LL merger. But Wilson Mifflin playing here for now. See, I count Shillington High School into this series. I know some others out there have said I think this is like the 64th meeting between Wilson Mifflin or something like that. So I actually have this as the 73rd meeting because, again, I can include their time against Shillington, which was the first 6 or 8 years of the meetings. But Wilson leads the series 43-29, but of course are coming off a recent loss, and the biggest loss in Wilson Mifflin history, well, at least for the Bulldogs. Last year, September 18th, 2020, the first game of the season, because of the weird way things worked out with all the COVID delays and cancellations, 48-7 loss for the Bulldogs a year ago against what I would think is probably easily the Mifflin's best team ever. What other team comes to mind to think of what's the best Mifflin team?
I look at it. If Mifflin beats Pine Richland last year, they win the state title. They were loaded.
Yeah, and then they were up in that vast majority of the game. They had the lead. They had a double-digit lead for a good portion of that game against Pine Richland, who's always really, really good. First time they ever won a district championship. And, Nick Singleton is a generational talent. You have a kid who's 200 pounds, who's squatting 500 pounds. He's benching 400 pounds. He's running a 10.85 100. People always ask, Paul, how do you know someone's a major Division I player? My answer has never changed. I say, watch him play once. At the high school level, they're going to be so much better than everyone else. You're not going to wonder, is he a D1? Is he a D2? Is he a D3? And that you saw that with a Chad Henney. You see that now with Nick Singleton. He's just on a different level. When Nick Saban's calling you, you can play. Alabama isn't going after, just some ordinary Joe down the block. And what a debut for Singleton. He went for 280 and 5 touchdowns. And they didn't beat York. They embarrassed York.
Yeah, it was 55-6. And Singleton set the Mifflin regular season single game rushing record. The program record is a ridiculous 352, but it was in a playoff game years ago. So, yeah, what a debut for Mifflin and Singleton.
Well, and I saw one of the highlights from that game was the play right before half where they run the option. And even there, there's guys out there, and he's bigger than everyone that he's outrunning. Sometimes you'll see, the small, shifty guy that's just faster than everybody. That's not what that was. He was bigger than all those guys that he just blew right past. Like you said, it's kind of one of those, it when you see it.
Micah Parsons was that way. Micah was obviously bigger, played a different position. But remember, Harrisburg was playing him at running back. And it was like Bo Jackson in Tecmo. He was just knocking people. He'd start to the left, go back to the right, go back. He just ran all over the field. Now, Singleton's not 225, 230 like Micah Parsons is, but he's strong as an ox. He spends a ton of time in the weight room, and he's not the only guy. It's not a one-man band. They lost Brandon Strausser at fullback, but now Trey Rock is the guy who had experience and is very good. And if it's Eden Johnson at quarterback, who came in last year from West Catholic in Philly, they have quarterbacks who have great speed too in that option game. And York High traditionally is a scary team because of their skill position players. But when you play Mifflin, if you're not ready to strap it up and play a physical game, they're going to destroy you. And that's what happened yesterday. Mifflin there's no surprises, although Singleton did throw a pass almost 50 yards last year in the Wilson game. But you talk to coaches and they'll say, look at the linemen, how they come off the ball. That's what they're going to do. It's old school in this day and age of spreading everything out. Jeff Lang's an old lineman from Western PA, was a very good college player, and they don't mess around. They're going to play their style. They're going to run the football, and if you can stop them, you have a real good shot. But there are other weapons there. Tyler Minnick, great baseball player. He's going to play receiver for them. So it's a dangerous team.
You mentioned that Michael Parsons Harrisburg team with him running around like Bo Jackson. Who upset them in the playoffs?
Governor Mifflin did, right.
So, yeah, Wilson's got their work cut out for them. You know, they obviously are thinking about last year, and last year Mifflin was thinking about the year before that. So the games haven't been close the last couple of years, and you know, we'll see what happens Friday night in Shillington. I know Wilson fans are not happy to have to go to Shillington because they desperately need to fix their seating on the visitors' side. The home side is great. The turf itself is wonderful, but man, those visitor stands could use some upgrades. That's for sure.
Tight quarters over there.
Yeah, tight quarters. So
speaking of stopping the run, we haven't mentioned Dominic Memo yet, and definitely should. And he's going to be key in this game because you have to stop the run. But when I was at Wilson's practice, every coach I spoke to said, "Paul, look at this kid. Like, you know, people don't really know about him. He's undersized for a D tackle, but he's quick." And a lot of offensive linemen struggle to block the quicker guys more so than someone who's 275.
Well, and every year Joey and I talk about there's a guy, or in better seasons, guys that like kind of go under the radar and wait their turn, and then their senior year kind of come out of nowhere. And Memo would be a great. Yeah, I'd love for that to happen, for that to be, you know, because that would be good for him and obviously a good sign for the team. So yeah, I hope he has a big night on Friday.
Yeah, if Wilson wants to win, they're going to need an amazing game from that front seven. Like, there's no way to hide that. You have to get whatever personnel they use, because John Ramsey, Nick Weissel playing defensive end against Central Dauphin. I'm sure they'll get time on Friday night, but inside, Eli Rodriguez and Dominic Memo are the keys to the game, and the linebackers coming in behind them, making the right reads, filling the right gaps, staying disciplined, not getting caught on the counter coming back, or like you mentioned last year, Singleton connected on, you know, the wing or the fullback or running back pass wherever he was lined up.
And we saw a couple broken plays last night, you know, where you know, linemen are chasing and guys got behind defenders. Like, you gotta be on top of your game.
Aiden Martin's another one from Governor Mifflin. Jeff Lang said he's one of the few players he's ever coached, and he's been on that staff 30 years. He benches twice his weight. He's about 180 pounds, super strong. He's been starting since he was a freshman.
Right, yeah, we got to see him in 2019 as a freshman. So, you know, he's an established veteran and only a junior.
The other big similarity is up front. You know, Wilson has all the new starters on the offensive line. Same case for Governor. All 5 of their linemen graduated, so they kicked Nate Goodman inside to tackle. Right, he's about 6'5". He played tight end. Now like a blocking tight end because they had Cam Stewart.
Right.
So who's now at Rutgers. So they moved him to tackle, but the other 4 are new starters. Now, Jonah Noggle played very well, graded out the highest among their linemen against York yesterday. And he's a big kid, but it's inexperienced players on both offensive lines.
The biggest thing that Mifflin has going for them in their non-league games and most of their non-league games and their playoff games is the unique offense that a lot of teams don't see. And that's one of the reasons that they were able to trip up Harrisburg a few years ago. Harrisburg doesn't see that offense that often. You know, maybe in the past, Cumberland Valley may be similar. Central Dolphins run-oriented, but it's not quite what Mifflin's running. CV is now a spread team under Oswald, though, so they got rid of that completely. Man, they're struggling. That's a program that needs to rebound. But Mifflin and Wilson have been playing for so long. The offense, it's not unique or a novelty to the Wilson defensive staff, and especially when your head coach is Doug Doms has been on the crew for so long, and Ernie Wolber now just you mentioned him talking about the Central Dauphin game, listening to him speak to his players at halftime. He said, "Guys, we're not changing anything. We're there. There's a few mental mistakes. If we clean that up, you guys are doing it." He was excited about, the 3rd and 4th down stops they're getting against these big guys. They're big linemen, the big running back in English, and even Mosey. We are stopping them. We don't need to change anything. Go out there and do your job. Don't make the mental mistakes, and we're fine. And I'm sure they'll be ready to roll this Friday night against Mifflin.
The other thing about that Mifflin upset of Harrisburg, it was a monsoon for that Saturday game, and time of possession, which is rarely talked about in high school football, but Governor Mifflin, that particular game, it wasn't explosive plays. Now, with Singleton, you get those. But Isaac Ruas, who's at Navy now, he was the fullback then, and it was 3 yards, 4 yards, 5 yards, first down. Harrisburg's couldn't get on the field, couldn't get the offense on the field. They shortened the game. In a high school, it's 12-minute quarters. And we've seen wing T teams like Berks Catholic and Wyomissing. It can be very frustrating playing that offense because you see a 10, 12 play drive, half the quarter just elapsed on one drive. Now with Singleton, I mean, he can house it.
He can call a shot, essentially. That's what we're seeing from the video, from the opportunities presented to him. I wish I knew more about York William Penn because I don't know enough about them to see how they compare to
Very good running back. Really good running back. But again, if you're not good up front, you're not going to beat Mifflin.
No.
Because they're going to maul you. I mean, that's what they do. In fantasy football, and I see that great trophy you have over that. It's impressive. I don't know that I've ever seen a more impressive fantasy football trophy.
Who's on there 4 times, Joe?
My uncle, who's the reigning champ.
And who else? Who else is on there 4 times?
I don't want to talk about it.
How many times are you on, Joe?
2. I'm on 2.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, when was the last one?
I won 2 of the first 3 years and haven't won
Wow.
since.
Jeez.
Hey, we're not here to talk about me and my failures at fantasy football. No,
but I'm looking, and it should be a great crowd. I mean, it should be a fantastic crowd over there. Like I said, I mean, whoever knows with the weather, but it's not supposed to be 1,000 degrees like we've had recently. And it's the Hatfields and McCoys of Berks County. It's Duke Carolina, it's Army Navy, it's Eagles Cowboys, it's Yankees Red Sox. That's what it is in this county football wise. You say Mifflin and Wilson, even with the scores recently, people are still interested. And Singleton, I used to say this about Lonnie Walker and Henny and Mennett when he was at Exeter, and we've been fortunate. So many of these, great athletes that we've had, baseball players too, Luke Holman, Stevie Mitchell. Go see these kids play before they're out of school. I mean, same with Mike Capar. I mean, the talent level of these, it's hard to believe they're high school kid. I mean, it's just...
Well, and the value you're getting for how cheap high school admission is to go see these guys play. Don't miss the opportunity. If you've got a star high school athlete, boy or girl, doesn't matter what. It doesn't even matter what the sport. Even if it's something you're not familiar with, go and watch them play. Learn something. Take it in.
And Nick also is a super nice guy. He's very soft spoken. He's humble. For someone of his stature. I mean, now he's known across the country, depending which recruiting services you look at. I mean, but he's one of the top running backs in the nation. It was a huge get for Penn State. Again, Alabama offered him. Ohio State was in on. Everybody was in on him. But really nice kid. When he made his announcement, his parents were right up there with him. It wasn't one of these deals where just the athlete sitting by himself. He had his parents on both sides, which I thought was a classy move. But when the game starts, he's a different type of dude. I mean, he really started running violently. Well, I mean, Wilson handled them early in his career, and then Nick realized. And his coaches, I think, stressed you can't just outrun people anymore. They want to see your strength, your power, and now he can run over you too. So.
Well, I think I'm going to take another opportunity to speak for Justin, and he will be in a full agreement with me that as of, I'll say, about 10 p.m. Friday night, we will be huge Nick Singleton fans.
Yes.
But up until that point...
Starting Saturday, assuming the game is Friday.
Right, yes, that's true.
Maybe assuming the game is Friday this week, starting Saturday, I hope he is...
We wish him nothing but the best
from the rest of his career.
From as soon as that game against Wilson, whenever it is, hopefully Friday, should be Friday. I don't think we're going to have issues with weather. When that game is over, we are big Nick Singleton fans. I hope he has a great rest of his season for Mifflin. and I can't wait to see what he can do up at Penn State.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited.
And obviously, you can't see him in districts.
Yeah, right.
For the
It's not-
casual fan,
we're done there.
Right. For the casual fan, Mifflin's in 5A, Wilson's in 6A.
For this
so.
year, we'll see what happens
Because it was
next
close.
year.
The last
Yeah,
one,
one
wasn't it?
kid, one male enrolled student was the difference between 5A and 6A for them last time. So end of November, early December this year, the new enrollment figures will come out for the classification purposes. So we'll see what happens. But we're running a little long, but I do want to just give us like a couple minute take on Exeter, since maybe you can come back next week and then we can talk about them then. But in case that doesn't happen, let's give your take on Exeter, since that's who Wilson plays in 2 weeks and you've already seen him in person.
Yeah, my social life isn't the best. Maybe why I'm single, but that's a story for a different show.
It's a different podcast. Yeah.
But Exeter, your secondary better be able to cover, because you're going to have Schlaffer at either tight end or wide receiver, who's 6'6". He is the half-brother of Michael Mennett. He's only a junior. Already has Power 5 offers. Tennessee is in on him. Michigan State is in on him. Pitt's in on him. And then you have J.R. Strauss, who had one of the best games I've ever seen from a tight end in high school football, and one of the best plays. He had a 50-yard touchdown catch where he jumped over a play. And J.R. Strauss is a strong kid. Villanova fans, you should be thrilled you're getting this kid. He will run through a brick wall for his team, but he also showed his athleticism. He plays linebacker and tight end. He's another one of those kids. I think he's been in high school like 20 years, just because he started playing.
Around, right?
But you have Strauss, you have Schlaffer, you have another Yoakum. This is Ty.
How is that possible?
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Who is just a bulldozer. Wilson, if he was wearing red and white, Wilson fans would love it. He's like your throwback fullback. They were more physical than Central York. And Coach Bauer told me in the interview he was sick to his stomach, and I can understand. Exeter certainly had his shot, and Central York was number 4 in the state in 6A by Penn Live in the preseason poll. State runner-up last year, quarterback back who's committed to Penn State, other good skill position players too, and Exeter was right there. Could have won the game, struggled in the red zone, got to the 8-yard line in the final minute, could not punch it in, lost by a touchdown, missed 2 field goals in the game, had an interception. Coverage on special teams hurt them sometimes, but it's a talented group. It's Michael Mennett's senior year. They won Section 1. That was a really good group. They beat Mifflin. This team with Schlaffer, Strauss, Yoakum, Colin Payne is the quarterback, who's a good all-around athlete. He was the leading scorer in their basketball team this year. First-year starter now, but last year he could have started for a lot of programs, but they had Gavin McCusker, who was a
big-time
good
player for them.
Yeah, he was a real good quarterback too. Exeter isn't huge up front.
That was going to be my next question. How are they on the line?
They're not. They have one lineman who's about 330, but
okay.
Right. But the others are more in the 210 to 220 type. So he kind of if you look at their average for their line, it's going to be thrown off. Right. It's gonna be thrown off a little. But like I said, they were, to me, the more physical team against Central York, and they were right there. And then they have like Jacob Wolf at receiver, Carson Schmidt at receiver, who aren't the D1 type of kids, but they're experienced players. They have good hands. So skill-wise, Exeter, if they're Wilson fans thinking, we're playing a team from the Berks League, this is going to be a walk in the. I guarantee that is going to be an unbelievable crowd at Don Thomas Stadium, because there's a lot of talent on that team.
So
if they clean things up, it's a good team.
According to my research in the stats book, and then with a little help from the Max Preps history, Wilson and Exeter haven't played since 2007.
That's my okay.
That's what I had.
Is that a playoff game?
No. There was a home and home series in 06, 07.
So you know what?
Apparently,
You know what? I saw at least one of those games because that was when I was back home, and actually.
And they had played
Yes.
Wilson leads 6-0 is where
So
I'm going.
I remember
Okay.
that because Exeter brought their band, and their band at the time had like 180 kids. It was a
Their
huge,
band is awesome.
Yeah.
It really is.
It reminds me of like a college type thing where they're
They
having a good time. They play.
They
all
do.
The time.
Yeah. They'll do like shows after the game sometimes over there.
So Wilson Exeter last happened on September 14th, 2007.
Okay.
Wilson won 38-0. That was at Wilson. So that's what
the
you're
one.
thinking
That's
of.
the one I was there.
The year before, on either September 15th or 13th, I forget, in 2006 at Exeter, Wilson won 35-0. So
Okay.
those two games combined score was 73-0. So
And keep in mind, before Matt Bauer took, I think this is his 13th year. They had some winless seasons.
that probably would have been right after. After those, that
I mean,
series.
they had, and even like his first, but now they've, they're a team that's over 500. They had a long streak of making districts that unfortunately was broken last year.
We're familiar with that, yeah.
Right.
Well, my whole point of bringing that up, and we'll talk about it more next week with the Exeter preview, but is just this is not
Bingo.
Exeter from 15 years
Bingo.
ago. And,
Right.
and if there are people out there listening that hear fellow Wilson fans dismissing Exeter because it's a Berks team, you need to tell them to watch the show, this show, and then next week's show. And
watch the Central York film if it's out there.
Sure, yeah, that's even better.
Yeah.
But know that the players and coaches have known for a while that this was a game. And we've been talking we talked in the offseason, Paul.
Yes,
we went over the schedule that Wilson's first 5 games are absurd, and Exeter's right in the middle of it.
Right.
It's the third one. And the amount of talent on that Exeter team is right up there with the rest of the teams Wilson's playing.
Strauss already committed to Villanova. Schlaffer has Power 5 offers. Yoakum, he has one Division I offer, but I'm sure the PSAC schools would be all over him. So that's 3 right there. And you have a good quarterback, a smart kid, composed kid in Colin Payne, who's running that. And Eric Nangle, the tailback, nobody talks about, is a really good football player. But because of the other, the other D1 talent, he kind of goes under the radar. He had 20 carries in the first half against Central York. So they're not afraid to give him the ball. They have players over there.
All right, Paul. Well, I can feel the metaphorical eyes of the coaching staff saying, why are you talking about Exeter? We play Mifflin this week. So I'm going to cut you off there.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about it. Maybe you want to come back next week, talk a little bit more about Exeter. We'll see. We'll figure that out. But I do want to thank you for joining us again. It's always great to have you on the show. It adds a certain amount of panache to the episodes when we've got a broadcasting veteran who knows so much about all of the local teams. And again, you can get more of Paul at berksportsreport.com. And we thank his leading sponsor at the Yard. And because of the generosity of Paul, Justin and I will get to try out around there hopefully soon. So we appreciate that.
I know I've told you too before, but I hope the Wilson community appreciates the work you guys do. Like you were talking about, the whole production setup, all the interviews you guys are doing, this type of show. Most high schools, they don't even dream of this type of coverage. So what people get from you guys on a regular basis, it's terrific. And Joe doing the stats, Joe Peters. I mean, it's like there are some colleges that would love to have this type of coverage.
Well, thank you. We always appreciate those kind words, and we absolutely agree with you with everything else that goes on with the program and the athletic department in general. It's all very, very
And
good.
thanks to Drew Kaufman for giving me my own booth at the game.
Hey,
I saw you next door.
VIP treatment of it.
VIP, yeah, that's right. Make sure you get your own press pass because you got to get into these games. I don't want to hear Paul Roberts wasn't allowed into a game because
not going to happen in Berks County.
That's
we know
not
that.
going to happen. Yeah.
All right, Paul. So thanks so much for joining us, Justin. You got anything to say before we get out of here?
No, just thanks again. And for those of you that haven't been there yet, hop over to Paul's new site and check out the interviews. Like you said, he has a bunch of interviews from the games on Friday, and I'm sure lots of other stuff that'll keep you on there for a while. So
yeah, so absolutely huge week. It is Mifflin week, and yes, James and Danny in the chat beat Mifflin all week long. Let's get it going. Get hyped. Get excited. Get to the game early because you're gonna need it to get a seat over there for you Wilson fans. So come out, show up at Shillington, have a great time, enjoy the rivalry. Don't be stupid about it. Just enjoy what's going on in the field. You heard Paul talk about you're getting to see a once in a generation talent. Yes, he plays for Mifflin, but you still want to have fun watching it, and we're still going to get to watch two awesome high school football teams play. And obviously, we hope things turn up red and white on Friday night. And we'll be here to talk about all of it again in 1 week's time. We'll recap the game against Mifflin and preview the game, even more so, against Exeter on episode 7 of our 7th season next Sunday, September 5th at 8:30 on all the stations that we're streaming on now, which I'm not even going to care to mention because it's like 5 of them or whatever. So for Justin Raffoff, I'm Joe Mays. Thanks again to Paul Roberts. And until next time, remember, go Bulldogs.
Listening to this week's episode of the Bulldog Hour. Want more Wilson football? Follow the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud, or visit www.bulldoghour.com. The Bulldog Hour is a featured program on jmnjrradio.com.